Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, turns out the symptoms of societal decay are universal. They're not unique to a specific society. You recognize them in any country at any time, now or 1,000 years ago. Always the same. The men become weak, the leaders get decadent, law enforcement gets politicized, the currency gets devalued, and then things.
Yeah, law enforcement famously non-political until this very moment. Like, the earliest form of law enforcement is literally slave catchers. Meanwhile, Tucker's like, law enforcement, we need to go back to a time when law enforcement wasn't politicized.
Things begin to come apart. Pretty soon, doesn't take long, the society can no longer perform its most basic function. The reason we have societies in the first place, which is to protect the weak from the strong. That's why you have a society. Well, in places like this, it becomes, among many other things, very hard to travel anywhere. You just can't go where you want to go. With legitimate authority in retreat, roads are not controlled by the police. They're controlled by armed predators. And the armed predators take exactly what they want from travelers because they can. This is an ancient problem. It used to be called highway robbery. And for most of history, it kept people very close to home. Turns out it still exists, but now it's called
back in the day, highway robberies was the reason why people didn't travel, and not because like airplanes didn't exist. I just want to know what the he's talking about and how he's gonna drive home the point that this is somehow black people that did this.
Carjacking. Carjacking is the clearest possible sign that your civilization is falling apart, and that's why you find it in places.
Oh no, this one is about black people. Got it.
It's like Somalia and South Africa. Places where force, violence, and clan loyalty have replaced law and order. Places where money.
I don't know why I paused it right before he just, delivered it, because it's only 1 minute and 22 seconds in. Like, he's gonna. Tucker Carlson is the most predictable racial agitator, the most predictable propagandist, dude. It's like expecting Hitler to somehow tie everything back to the Jews. It's not that much of a. After a certain point, you're like, okay, well, Hitler, you're kind of doing the same thing every day, yeah? That's with Tucker Carlson's the same shit,
Might makes right. In the city of Johannesburg, for example, a vehicle is hijacked on average once every hour of the day. Now, once that happens, there's really no coming back from it. Nobody's going to build anything in a city with endemic carjacking. In fact, most normal people will leave as fast as they can, as they have in Johannesburg. As they are starting to do, we are sad to tell you, in the city of New Orleans, where carjacking is now a permanent feature of life. Last summer, a law student called Madison Bergeron pulled into the driveway of her home in New Orleans. As she gathered her belongings in the car, a young man appeared out of nowhere, stuck a gun in her face, and demanded that she hand over everything she had, including the car. He screamed at her. Terrified, she complied. And that's what carjacking is always like. It is an act of violence. People don't want to give up their cars. They have to be terrified into doing so. That's why the majority of victims are women, old women, young women. And that's why the people who do it will do anything.
White women.
If you will carjack, if you will steal someone's car at gunpoint, you will also rape. You will also murder. You have no limits.
Wait, what? What?
You are willing to violate on the most basic level the civil rights of another person. And in this,
bro, I don't even understand like the logical leap that went from, hey, you're willing to act out in an incredibly violent way, okay, in an effort to put money in your fucking pocket by stealing a car, and if you're willing to do that, then you will also rape someone. What the fuck do you mean? And I'm sure the example that he has also features like some kind of sexual violence, because like Tucker doesn't just say that. He's a very good propagandist. I'm sure he can like anecdotally point to like a singular instance, but like fundamentally, the carjacking is done for, a financial purpose.
In this case, that was certainly true, because that same perpetrator went on, after terrifying Madison Bergeron and stealing her car, to do the same to other women in the city.
Called it.
A lot of them. There was a car blocking me in, one victim recalled. And next thing I turn and there's yelling and there's a gun barrel in my face. The kid is yelling to get the F out of the car, get the F out of the car, or else he will shoot me. In all, the carjacker would terrorize 5 women and steal 5 cars in just 2 days before New Orleans police finally arrested him. And it's amazing that they did, because they're...
Let me guess. They released them. They released them for one reason or the other, either of overcrowding, even though I don't think New Orleans has that same problem that California does, or they released them because of like shitty paperwork, or they released them as a consequence of like police incompetence in the way that they did this arrest, or they released him because he's a fucking minor. And God forbid you analyze a situation where any of those things happen and the person who's like responsible for it, there's no systemic assessment. It's all the individual responsibility of the crimer doing crimes. Can't stop doing crimes because he wants to be a criminal.
Virtually no police left in New Orleans. In a city that probably needs about 2,000 cops, there are under 500 active duty policemen left in New Orleans. In New Orleans, they have definitely defunded the police. But in this case, the carjacker, a young teenager, was ultimately caught, tried, convicted, and sentenced for his crimes. Now, these crimes got a lot of attention in New Orleans.
Wait. Oh, teenager, by the way, called that part. Hold on. New Orleans has no police anymore? Under Mayor LaToya Control's proposed budget for the upcoming year, the New Orleans Police Department will receive $193,822,403 in funding, which is $16 million more than this year's budget. Man, that shit looks so defunded, dude. Anyway, let's continue.
So the mayor of the city, LaToya Cantrell, showed up to the sentencing.
Also, another fun fact, which is not a fun fact, I lied to you. It's a very sad and very fucked up fact. Angola is literally a plantation. Louisiana State Penitentiary, also known as Angola, is literally a plantation. Overwhelmingly black. And yes, slave labor is still very much alive and well.
But here's the twist in the story. Mayor Cantrell didn't show up to support the victims, the women who'd been terrorized by this predator. No. The mayor showed up to support the carjacker and to let the entire city know that she was doing it, to let everyone know whose side she was on. Watch.
The mayor showed up in court as a character witness for a 14-year-old offender during sentencing. The teen robbed 3 women in separate incidents with a fake gun, stealing.
He was 14 years old. Notice how he never mentioned that, by the way, and made it seem like the gun was real, made it seem like this dude was an adult, made it seem like this dude was an adult who was like capable of raping too. It's a 14-year-old with a fake gun. Did the girls know the gun was fake though? No, that doesn't matter. Tucker Carlson knows. Why is he reporting it in the way that he's reporting it, dumbass? That's the point. A fake gun implies that like he just wants to steal. He doesn't want to harm. He doesn't want to kill. He just wants to steal the car. It goes directly against Tucker Carlson's propaganda. How do you not understand that?
Their cars and belongings. The victims told Fox 8 they were traumatized by what happened. And then they felt victimized all over again when the mayor showed up in support of the young criminal.
I was in shock. She wasn't there for us. She was there for the assaultant and his mother, and it felt like she was supporting the crime.
Juvenile judge Renard Darensburg sentenced the juvenile to a 3-year suspended sentence, meaning no jail time.
It felt like she was supporting the crime, said the victim. Well, yes, it did, because that's exactly what the mayor was doing. Cantrell was taking the side of the carjacker over the traumatized, law-abiding woman. Now, in New Orleans, Cantrell is known by her nickname, TD.
The judge sentenced a 13-year-old. Oh, my God. He's not even 14. He's 13. Dude, no, we need like, oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God, bro. Oh, my God. Tucker Carlson just made it seem like an adult man with a real gun who was capable of going out and like raping people was literally doing a sequence of like high impact robberies, whereas it was a 13-year-old child. That is an abject failure, dude. That is an abject failure of the system. You guys understand what's going on here, right? You understand what Tucker Carlson is doing. 14-year-olds are very much capable of rape and murder. Proof. Thanks, I'm your Christ. Thank you for bringing up the New York Post. An article from 2016. I'm glad in order to find racial agitprop to correspond to the other anecdote that was misrepresented, you had to go all the way back to fucking 2016.
But many people call her exactly what she is, LaToya the Destroyer. She is in fact a destroyer. The mayor is incompetent. The mayor is an open race hater. The mayor is an encourager of violence, and she is destroying an already wounded city. We reached out to Mayor Cantrell's office to ask why she's doing all of this. Why did she pressure a judge to release a convicted armed carjacker with no prison time? But of course, she didn't reply to us. It turns out the mayor of New Orleans had a connection to this carjacker. Cantrell had enrolled this person in one of her administration's welfare programs called Pathways Youth Internship Program. Using taxpayer money, the program says it provides young people who commit crimes with a reward, paid internships and a stipend. We contacted the Pathways program this morning. We want to know how many people enrolled in that program go on to...
I brought it up because your commentary seemed like a teenager cannot possibly do heinous crimes, and I immediately recalled this case, which horrified me. You seem mad because it seemed not to fit your narrative. I Googled it and linked the first article that came up. No, I'm not mad because it doesn't fit my narrative, you fucking idiot. Of course I understand that 13-year-olds are still capable of committing heinous fucking crimes. The idea, however, is not that you literally judge every 13 or 14-year-old by what one 14-year-old was capable of doing. You fucking dumbass. How do you not understand? But you are so fucking insanely brain broken that your brain has turned into such incredible mush that you think, one, you're slanted towards justice in this circumstance for regurgitating racial agitprop that you got from a right-wing dish rag like the New York Post, okay, that you think it actually justifies the additional incredible punishment that this fucking 13, 14-year-old kid is getting, or rather, the lack of structural analysis that led to a 13-year-old doing such ridiculous carjackings. But now also on top of that, you're such a fucking debate pervert that you think you did something adequate here. But you are probably, again, another painfully white fucking liberal who lives in the lap of privilege, who cannot comprehend how a 13-year-old could be in such dire circumstances that and have no adequate social safety nets, barely any kind of fucking meaningful shelter, any fucking serious positive influences in his life, that he goes around and fucking carjacks. But instead of trying to look at the underlying systemic failures that led to a 13-year-old, you are doing racial agitative propaganda in a leftist community. Okay? There is no narrative set here other than, yes, 13-year-old boys stealing cars implies that there is some kind of structural failure here. Anything beyond that is just racial agitative propaganda. The first thing that went in your mind, the first thing that you went to was, how do I further the Tucker Carlson narrative here by adding additional racial agitprop? Because the use case for why you brought that up, was to, further reinforce Tucker Carlson's perspective that 13-year-olds should be locked in jail forever. The wild part about this process is that the kid that Tucker Carlson's talking about didn't even rape anyone. Tucker just said someone who can carjack also has the capacity to rape. He also called this person an adult, made it seem like this was a fucking adult. Meanwhile, it was none of those things. And the reason why he got a 3-month sentence apparently is because the kid was a part of the Pathways program.
They commit violent crime within 5 years. We also asked how much taxpayer money they spend, but of course they didn't answer. But we don't need an answer. We know exactly what this is.
Thank you, Olfen.
Pathways, like most social justice scams, is not in fact designed to reduce crime. It's about siding with the criminal, giving the criminals as much support as they need.
I really hope that motherfucker that I timed out is embarrassed right now. He's literally, Tucker Carlson, the person you're agreeing with, is straight up fucking advocating against rehabilitation, is straight up advocating against like any sort of fucking social safety measure that genuinely does reduce crime.
A courtroom visit from the mayor if necessary, so they can go out and commit more crimes as soon as possible. So why would you do something like this if you were the mayor of a city of New Orleans? Why would you force people to leave your city, the people who pay all the taxes, of all colors, by the way? Why would you do that? Well, possibly because the people who are left tend to be the ones who vote for you. So it is a kind of electoral strategy. It's not just happening in New Orleans.
Yeah, this is what is like the most frustrating element. You're right. It's sad to see a chatter can't understand that bringing up a case from 2016 to disprove a point you never made only serves to reinforce Tucker's narrative. Exactly.
It's happening in a lot of places. The downside is it leads to carnage. There have already been 191 carjackings in the city of New Orleans this year alone. Through all of last year, there were a total of 177. Now, most of these carjackings, and this is true in a lot of other places, Washington, D.C., we think, most of these are committed by people under the age of 18. Why? Because they know they'll get off. There's no cause. The local station WWL-TV found that in 2021, juvenile carjacking suspects outnumbered adults by more than 2 to 1. Now, that doesn't mean that these are Nerf versions of carjackings. They're very violent. In fact, they're always violent, and sometimes they're fatal. In March, several juveniles aged 15 to 17 mutilated the body of a grandmother, an elderly woman, as they carjacked her in mid-city New Orleans. They dragged her body down the street. Here's Fox 8 New Orleans reporting on it.
17-year-old John Honore, 16-year-old Brenaya Baker, and 15-year-olds Markel Curtis and Linraya Theophile.
Dude, Tucker Carlson does this every night, dude. Oh my God, he literally does this every night. This is exactly what the local news does all the time to fucking break the brains of your parents. And for the record, no matter how gruesome this crime is, of course, crime is a constant part of living in a city, living in a rural area. You have to understand this. What Tucker Carlson is doing is deliberately only showing you black kids or black people doing the crime. Donald Trump does another version of this as well, where he will talk about immigrant crimes to make it seem as though like you know, the only people who are doing crimes are immigrants and they're really violent, and you know, you need to take care of, you need to pay attention, pay close attention to immigration and immigrant crime. All of this, of course, is to reinforce the same white supremacist attitude that Tucker Carlson has. All this other shit that he talks about every night serves that same white supremacist purpose.
So again, society exists not to protect 17-year-olds with guns. On the most basic level, those are the strongest people in society, people willing to use force to get what they want. No, society exists to protect people who need the protection, the helpless, the weak, grandmothers who might be dragged and have their arms ripped off without police protection. And of course, in the absence of police protection and in the absence of leadership that cares about the weak, those are exactly the people who are murdered. And it's not just happening in New Orleans.
Demon.
What's interesting, if you pull back a little bit, and we have, because we think that carjacking is a really clear indication of things unraveling, you find that cities with Soros-backed DAs and well-funded diversion programs for at-risk youth are seeing surges in carjackings. Could there be a connection?
Well-funded diversion programs is such a fucking hilarious take. Yeah.
Connection. So why is this happening? Well, it's happening.
Great question. Do you think Tucker Carlson, seriously asking this to everyone in the chat, do you think Tucker Carlson will try to find a genuine answer, or do you think he will continue saying like, well, it's happening because, you know, we're too pro-black people, we're too pro on the side of criminals? Interchangeably, he will say those things, by the way, in an effort to never come across as racist. Do you think he's going to say that, or do you think he's going to say it's happening because people are really, really poor, income inequality has gotten completely out of control? He's going to say we enable the criminals and we harm the cops.
For very deep reasons. Any 15 or 17-year-old who sticks a gun in the face of strangers, threatens their lives, or kills them in order to steal a car is the product of something that is very hard to fix, disintegrating families. That's the real reason. But society, the authorities, still have an
That's what it was, dude. Damn.
Obligation to try and stop it for the sake of the rest of us. So what are these cities doing to stop it? Well, Philadelphia, like New Orleans, sends so-called at-risk youth to violin lessons through something called the Philadelphia Arts and Education Partnership. So the idea is, after a month of violin lessons, these young criminals, people who've been busted committing crimes, get their records expunged. That was the plan that Philadelphia's DA put into place last year. Has it worked? Well, sad to tell you that despite the violin lessons, crime has gone up among young people, carjackings in particular. As Philadelphia's police commissioner, Daniel Outlaw, put it, quote, I don't want to say it's surprising, but it's definitely concerning, really.
Tucker Carlson needs to be thrown in perma-jail just for that fucking fake laugh, dude. That fake laugh alone, jail, permanent jail time for Tucker.
Hey. Well, it's not surprising to us, but it is for sure an understatement. From 2020 to 2021, there's been a 108% increase in carjackings in Philadelphia.
I wonder why. Maybe there was a pandemic. What is it to 2019 to 2021? And the reason why I looked this up is because every other crime usually, like violent crime and whatnot, pre-pandemic, not financial crimes, not crimes that you do specifically for financial gain, but violent crimes like murders and whatnot, oftentimes in 2019 were super high, but then during the pandemic, you had less social interaction and boom, they dropped. So then after the economy opened up again and there was more foot traffic, there were more people being involved with one another, it shot up again. So what a lot of people do when they're talking about crime statistics is refuse to recognize that like crime is still on a downwards trend and hyper focus on the difference between 2020 and 2021, except This is one of the few crimes, this kind of property crime is one of the few crimes that has increased year over year. A couple of reasons for why it can happen. In the aftermath of the pandemic is because, one, the price of a used car or the availability of used cars are much lower now, and the price of a used car is much higher. So it makes it, there's an incentive for stealing a vehicle, which you can very easily steal, by the way. Holy shit, like people steal it with like a USB thumb drive or whatever. I don't know how the fuck they do it. Okay? That's one. The other reason is because they oftentimes do not have any sort of prospects, no school, no nothing to keep themselves busy if they're doing it for fun. A lot of 13-year-olds are not actually trying to fucking steal a car so they can pay for shit. They're just doing it because they have nothing else going on.
Chicago, too, putting up similar numbers. Chicago has had more than 1,000 carjackings this year alone. What does that do to a city? 1,000 carjackings? For every carjacking, there is a much larger group of people now afraid to drive. Now, Chicago is the place where Soros-backed DA Kim Foxx recently implemented something called the Juvenile Intervention and Support Center. Right. For this initiative, Fox partnered with, and we're quoting, black-owned, black-run businesses called Chi by Design, which pledges to, quote, be bold in our collaborative approach to create anti-racist outcomes. Really? So it's been completely politicized. The point of law enforcement traditionally has been to enforce the law, laws that are passed by legislatures as a product of the democratic process in order to protect everybody else. Now the point of law enforcement is to affect anti-racist outcomes, in other words, political outcomes. How's that working in Chicago? Well, here's Fox 32 Chicago to tell you.
There's a carjacked car.
Yep.
Chicago's on it. We got eyes on it.
One of the passengers in the stolen SUV eventually fled. When police caught him, they discovered he was 17 years old, released to his mother. Sadly, he's not the youngest suspect that members of the carjacking task force have seen.
A well-known 11-year-old.
That have been in contact.
Did he just say a well-known 11-year-old? If you think this is just like the fault of the parents, I don't know what to tell you, okay? No, this is societal collapse. You are watching the wealthiest nation on earth collapse in front of your fucking eyes. You can desperately try to, you know, point the finger of blame at like mothers, individual responsibility, bootstraps. But like, it's very clear that like something has failed so dramatically. Oh, video games. Like, no, motherfucker. It's not. It's not video games, dude. What the fuck?
With police before?
Yes.
An 11-year-old was arrested in Chicago as part of a carjacking crew, and it was not his first time.
11 years old. One of that carjacker's victims said that, quote, he actually skipped like a child all the way up to the car he stole. We can't tell you his name because he's an at-risk youth. Apparently needs.
What? No, you can't tell people his name because he's 11, Tucker. Dog, that's an 11-year-old. I mean, this is like beyond at this point, it's beyond parody. Tucker Carlson's about to be like 9-year-olds. Why can't we dox them? Tucker, literally the most popular news broadcast, dude. The most popular news broadcast in the fucking country. And he's like, why can't I dox an 11-year-old on the most popular news broadcast in the country?
More violin lessons, and he will soon be a productive member of society. This is a joke. The people administering the program know it's a joke. It doesn't achieve the main overriding goal, which is to protect people who just want to go to the grocery store, protect grandmothers who want to go to church, protect everybody else who wants to go to work in the morning, who wants to live in a city where you can travel on the roads without being killed. So, as you so often see in these cases, the person who commits the crime has committed a ton of other crime, because it turns out most crimes are committed by a very small number of people. And in this case, the girl who stole that car stole several other cars that month. Which makes you wonder, maybe violin lessons and visits in the courtroom from the mayor don't really work. Maybe these people need a father at home. The nuclear family? Right. Those things are not, in fact, racist. They are essential to any functioning civilization. And in lieu of them, it is clear that things fall apart. And the only thing you can do is to put people out of the public sphere, away, so that other people aren't hurt by them. That's the best we can do. And it's obligatory that we do it because people are being killed. And if you don't do that, you wind up with a society in which 11-year-olds treat carjacking like a sport because they know they can get out of jail very quickly. Here's Fox 2 in Detroit.
Detroit police arrested an 11, 12, and 4.
Bro, Tucker Carlson is literally... Yo, he's literally saying that, like, 11-year-olds need to go to fucking permanent prison. That's an insane argument to make on the most popular news broadcast in the country. I think I might do a permanent ban on Tucker Carlson rhetoric. It really hurts me. It is just like a never-ending sequence. It's like a 17-minute compilation of him just, like, tying insane things together, which are the exact opposite, by the way. Like, looking at societal collapse, looking at all the fucking functions of a civilized society, and instead of saying like, hey, we got to do something about this, like we got to do like adequate funding, you know, we got to make sure that, you know, people aren't doing all this. Like, he just straight up is like, they're doing it because we're not punishing them severely enough. In a country where, you know, we lock 25% of the entire planet's prisoner population. America is 4% of the overall population of the planet, and yet has 25% of the entire incarcerated population. We have more prisoners per capita than any other fucking country on the planet, including China. It's like a 17-minute Gish Gallop session of cherry-picked data, like cherry-picked anecdotes of like black people doing crimes. He does this every fucking night, and his solution is screaming bloody murder.